Hello and welcome to Views on News. I'm Jawad Tehami. As we all know that the IMF review mission to gauge the economic performance and the steps taken by the authorities in Pakistan for the economic stabilization. That particular team is here in Pakistan with its head, Mr. Nathan Porter, in Pakistan. The latest regarding that particular front is that Mr. Nathan Porter has called on caretaker Prime Minister Mr. Anwarul Haqqaqar and has apprised him of the status of the negotiations held at the technical levels with the team of the government of Pakistan under the first review of the standby arrangement that was reached between Pakistani authorities and the IMF back in July. $3 billion standby agreement. This particular review is for the release of the second tranche of this particular standby arrangement. Now, Mr. Nathan Porter, while having a meeting with Mr. Anwarul Haqqaqar, has also acknowledged the efforts made by the government of Pakistan in meeting the various program quarterly targets, and he has stated that these efforts have resulted in the positive conclusion of the technical level talks. At the same time, the Prime Minister thanked the IMF team for its ongoing work with Pakistan and praised the leadership of the Minister of Finance and Revenue and the contribution of our team in taking the program forward. At the same time, the Prime Minister reaffirmed the government's enduring commitment to the reform efforts agreed with the IMF, as these are aimed at stabilizing the Pakistan's economy in the longer run. Earlier, we saw a similar sort of comments coming from the IMF chief, Ms. Kristalina Georgieva, who said the agreement for the release of the second tranche of the $3 billion SBA was expected this particular week. Now, we all know Pakistani authorities had to bring in and implement some tough measures and decisions under this IMF standby arrangement to stabilize the economy. Such type of comments coming from the IMF chief, also by the IMF review mission here in Pakistan, who is already in negotiations for the review of the economic performance, that speaks volumes about the kind of efforts and the measures the authorities have put in order to bring in the economic stability. Now, Ms. Kristalina Georgieva, during that particular TV interview, also said that Pakistani authorities, especially the finance minister, deserve credit for a very difficult time sticking to the program that they have. Before heading into the discussion, let's watch a bit of that particular talk Ms. Kristalina Georgieva had with Bloomberg TV. After that, we'll be introducing our panelists today.
In Pakistan, negotiations are ongoing. How close are you to an agreement?
Close.
How close? What is key?
I expect an agreement of the review to come within this week. So any day now. And I can say that the Pakistani authorities, the Minister of Finance, they deserve credit for, in a very difficult time, sticking to the program that they have.
So in today's discussion, we are going to take up for discussion the important points of this particular TV interview of Ms. Kristalina Georgieva. We will also be discussing as to what efforts and the measures the authorities in Pakistan took while navigating through very narrow corridor, keeping and sticking to those very conditions of the IMF standby arrangement, and also bringing in the economic stability as well. I will also be discussing as to what is required in the future in order to broaden the tax base, as we had already seen that caretaker Prime Minister Mr. Anwarul Haqqaqar held an important meeting directing the concerned officials to take all the stakeholders on board to formulate a comprehensive strategy regarding enhancing the performance of the FBR, in which he was given a detailed briefing regarding the measure of digitalization of this taxation system here in Pakistan. Let me bring in our panelists for today's show. We are honored to have been joined in the studio by Dr. Manzoor Ahmad. He is member task force for tax reforms. Dr. Manzoor, thank you very much for taking time out for Views on News tonight. We really appreciate that. At the same time, we are honored to have been joined in the studio by Mia Mohammed Ramzan. He's senior economist, he's FCMA tax expert, CEO TMRC, and chairman tax committee and former executive member, Islamabad Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Mr. Ramzan, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. Let me begin the discussion with you, Dr. Manzoor. Now, these sort of statements were coming not only from the IMF chief herself, but also by the review mission who is having negotiations with Pakistani authorities regarding the review of that particular performance and the efforts and the measures have been put in by Pakistani authorities regarding the economic stabilization and meeting those IMF conditions for this economic stabilization. First of all, on the face of it, if we analyze these statements, what sort of an impression do you get out of it?
Well, I think it's after a long time that even before the talks have kind of formally concluded, the IMF managing director as well as Mr. Nathan Porter have commended Pakistan on what they've achieved. So they've indicated that, you know, and clearly the IMF MD clearly said that within a week it will be finalized, because so that means that they're satisfied with the talks here. It's just a formality. Now this goes to the board, executive board, and who approve it.
Right. So that also shows we have also seen a continuous bullish trend happening at the Pakistan Stock Exchange a number of times, breaking that psychological barrier. Just yesterday, it crossed over 56,500 psychological barrier. What does that basically depict? Does it depict an overall recovery that is on a fast track of the overall economy in the country?
Both. I think it's once IMF expresses satisfaction with the reform process or with how the economy is going, that's a big signal for the domestic stock market picks up, but international media and bond market and, you know, other relevant financial circles, I think they all get this signal once that, okay, IMF has said, now they're on the right path, so they must be on the right path. And that's what it is.
Right. Now, Ms. Ramzan, what's your understanding of these statements which have just come from Kristalina Georgieva as well as Mr. Nathan Porter regarding the kind of efforts or the measures the authorities in Pakistan had to take for the economic stabilization, also sticking to that very program, navigating through a very narrow corridor when there were so many challenges faced by the Pakistani authorities on the economic front?
Mr. Jawad, thank you so much for inviting us on this August forum. Definitely they would have praised this because we are doing all what is required by IMF, and previously, I mean, in the last regime, there were some miscommitments happened as told by the media and also by IMF. But after the new agreement was signed by the government, then they started working to comply those. And although the Pakistanis have to bear its cost, as you see that, I mean, the cost of living has increased to manifold during the last few months, especially the petrol prices and the electricity prices and other things. We have to pay price. But the stabilization of the economy and to stabilize and the image building of the Pakistan was very much necessary, which government has taken up right decisions, I think, because there was no other option for the government for this. So they have done all, and they are meeting the targets. They are reducing the subsidies, especially on the electricity, and they are also subsidies on the petrol and everything. So on the other side, FBR performance has been commendable during these months, and they have met the target, rather they are over the target in the last 4 months. So overall things are going well, but the people of Pakistan have to suffer with this whatever, but I mean, internationally we have no other option to do that.
There was of course a narrow corridor for the authorities in Pakistan to navigate through in order to bring in that economic stability. For that the nation was also taken into confidence that perhaps some tough measures at this particular point in time to stabilize that economy and the overall outlook of it is the need of the hour, and we
Yes.
we have
Yes,
to
sure.
meet some tougher conditions, whether they are set by the IMF, right?
Yeah.
Dr. Manzoor, what's your what was the most difficult thing the government had to implement here in order to stay on track with that particular reform program as suggested by the IMF?
Yes, as Mr. Ramzan just said, I mean, I think the most difficult was to bring energy prices to their real cost. Government was, you know, after the big devaluation, and also the international prices going up, petrol prices had gone up very substantially. So the government had to, you know, kind of hike them quite substantially. Fortunately, afterwards, the rupee recovered its value, and also the international prices came down a little bit, so the government was able to reduce that. But then there was this problem of gas prices, because the government had not raised the prices for the last 10 years, almost. And always every government, I should say, pushed it on to the next government. But and there were a lot of other inefficiencies. They were, you know, especially the gas is supplied at rather cheap rate to homes. And the problem is that our own gas, we're running out every year, about 18–20%. So we have to import this LNG, which is quite expensive. Our local gas, we because it was in the government's hands, so they kept the prices very low, and the imported gas is at least 3 times high. Now, if we import that gas at that price and provide it at what the domestic gas is, so there was a lot of subsidy, which the government was bearing.
This phenomenon of subsidy, I'm really glad that you brought this particular point of this particular term of subsidy. How this particular phenomenon actually was at work when we previously talked about, as you already mentioned, during the last 10 years, the performance as far as the gas pricing was concerned, and how this particular phenomenon of subsidies, in terms of blanket subsidies and target subsidies, how did it, was it at play, and how did it affect overall, and that accumulation of the circular debt also?
You see, 2 or 3 kinds of subsidies. First, if we don't sell, if the government doesn't sell the local gas at the international prices, that means they are selling it much cheaper. So not only its gas gets wasted, but and then we have to fill in the gap by imported gas, and that's about 3 times more expensive. So that. But then government was also subsidizing, say, fertilizer plants, because they want to keep the prices of this urea, etc., low for farmers. That was one. Then there are some captive power plants which use local gas, and they didn't want to convert to LNG, you know, which is more expensive. So that's another one. Then for domestic use, as I said already, this is much, much lower price than it actually costs. So all these, this was kind of government was paying. I mean, this. So the circular debt had gone up into trillions, and the fear was that you know, these companies that provide this and so much. I mean, their financials getting into this trouble, so they might go just bankrupt.
So if we try to understand this particular equation in terms of proportional, connection, the circular debt and the subsidies.
Yes.
What sort of a relation do we establish out of it? When we talk about its relationship, is it directly proportional, or is
well,
is it
in some ways,
otherwise?
but then you also have some losses. You know, this was quite common in electricity, but not in gas, because this coming through. But they also started the what they call, I think, unaccounted for gases, whatever. You know, what starts from there and what reaches there, there's some disappears, evaporates, or whatever, it gets stolen or whatever. So that's one component of it. So maybe we pay for whatever, the 100 million cubic foot or something, and actually it gets 80. So that's a loss. Somebody has to pay for that.
So when we especially talk about the tariffs in electricity sector, right? So there was also a crackdown which is still underway as far as different parts of the country are concerned regarding stopping that power theft in different areas. So similar sort of an action is required in this particular area, and do you think the strategy
that was just that's one component. The other component is that all these captive power plants and fertilizer plants and domestic, if for in case of electricity, they had raised the prices. They started raising for a few months now, but in case of gas, nothing was done. So they have now tried to bring it to the level at which it actually costs. So.
Right. Mr. Ramzan, what's your understanding regarding as to what is the relationship between the circular debt and the subsidies, and how difficult was it for the authorities here in Pakistan in order to deal with that issue of the energy sector in particular?
Yes, this is a very complex cycle, basically circular debt. There are a number of components, especially when we talk about the circular debt, it starts from the end consumer. At the end, most of the departments are government. They are not paying to the distribution companies, and there are because when we talk about the circular debt, most of the times that under discussion is the power sector, and at the end is government, which is not paying to the distribution companies, and then distribution companies are not able to pay to the GenCos, the power generation companies, and then power generation companies. Most of them are government owned GenCos and private as well, and on the other side then power companies has to our major electricity portion is not on hydel, it is thermal, and they have to purchase fuel, and for fuel they have to pay to the OMCs and major is PSO. And then PSO has to purchase the oil from the refineries, and the refineries are mostly private, and then refineries after that then exploration companies, and exploration is one is OGDC, the major shareholder is government, and the import of the raw fuel. So there is a complete vicious cycle in which certain portion is government, certain portion is private. So it starts from the end consumer, which is government, and then the other component is wherever there are government entities in the between, they are making huge losses, even gross loss. You can see the GenCos, they are in the gross loss. Most of the GenCos are in gross loss. And if we see the distribution companies, they are also government owned. They are also having losses due to theft of the electricity and other factors.
Okay, so
the distribution losses are also there because we don't have the infrastructure up to that level that can tackle all the electricity to that can reach to the end consumer without any loss.
Okay.
So there are components are
very comprehensively this particular cycle of this particular circular debt phenomenon, right?
So it has components like losses and the government inability to pay, and then the private and public sector losses, and then all that. It goes like this.
Okay, so we have deciphered what actually largely what the problem is with this particular cycle. So after diagnosing what the problem basically is, what are the possible measures, where to start from, what needs to be done in order to rectify?
Sir, the first thing is to reduce the losses of the loss-making units. That is one thing, and there are inefficiencies as well. And on the other side, there is tariff disparity as well. So tariff disparity, the government is now tackling because now tariffs are, high for the last 3 months. For the last 4 or 5 months, the government has increased the prices of the electricity. So somehow that portion of loss will be recovered of the distribution companies. But then there is a huge loss of the on the theft and the distribution transmission lines. So how that will be recovered? That require huge investment, capital investment, because our transmission lines are not up to the mark, which can cater all the requirement of the distribution.
Okay, so when we talk about losses, are these losses, when we talk about the energy sector,
Yes.
for example, the gas sector, are these synonymous to the losses in terms of distribution lines not being that much modern efficient, as you mentioned, and
Yes.
theft also being another dimension? So are these losses synonymous in the gas sector as well as to that
Yes,
of
somehow
the
more.
electricity, or are there any differences?
There are two. When we talk about the losses, there are two factors. One is the inefficiencies, and inefficiencies, you know, that the culture in the government departments, the government-owned entities, that all the units are loss-making due to inefficiencies, overstaffing, and other things. You all know that what is happening. The people don't work, and then there are factors like we have old plants. They are not They are not that much efficient. So there are certain different factors. So if you say that's synonymous with the gas, yes, there is synonymity like line losses in gas, inefficiency in the gas sector is similar to the like in electricity.
Right, Dr. Manzoor, as per your understanding, how that similarity or correlation between these two, particular the electricity and gas sector, happens to be, and how to overcome? Could there be a joint strategy in order to overcome these losses?
There are some synonymity, but then there are major differences, because in case of, say, electricity, you'd find that these 8 to 10% losses are common with many countries, because it's overhead electric wires, and in case of gas, it's much less. In other countries maybe it's 2%, and here it's quite high. So
around 7%, yes.
7%, but in case of electricity, normally 7-8, and here it will be 17-18%. You see the difference there. But the other big problem was that gas was sold at much lower price, so people didn't care. The cooking appliances are very inefficient. Heaters, etc. Whatever is run on gas is very inefficient, because it was sold so cheaply, because we had this domestic gas for from 1950s, and didn't care. But now that the imported gas, and it's quite expensive, so you have to get the right price. Yeah.
Okay, so now let's talk about tax now. There's been a statement by Ms. Kristalina Georgieva during this particular TV interview also, that the country today collects, quote unquote, the country today collects 12% tax to GDP. We're saying it has to be at least 15% to help the revenue to sustain the functioning of your economy. Now, in terms of tax to GDP ratio, the percentage of it, which he has given a figure of, what's your understanding of that? How much, as we have seen in the recent past, there was a target set by FPR, and it achieved more than that. So, how basically this particular percentage could be increased, ideally so? What measures in the immediate term do you think could be taken? And then we'll talk about what kind of strategy could be chalked out as far as FPR's performance is concerned.
Okay, two or three major reforms that could be done. There are some sectors which hardly pay any tax. For example, agriculture is maybe 20% of the GDP, but maybe the total tax coming is 1 or 2%. It's the same thing with services. There's 60% of the GDP, but the tax they give is much less. I don't remember the percentage what they give, but it's much less than what it should be collected. So these sectors which are kind of, for example, these sectors, the one I mentioned, agriculture, and also there's some problem with real estate. I mean, the tax is not quite what they should be paying. So first is to collect this tax from those sectors which are exempt. Second, I think, is that you know, there's no proper system. There's no linkages. Now everything is electronic. So if a person travels outside, or if is, you know, has huge bills paying clubs and maybe for their children fee, etc., and if the person is not a taxpayer, and he should not be able to get away by being a non-filer and paying a little bit more. You know, they should try to link these data sources through NADRA, through FPR, but what they're doing now is that they're trying to link the point of sale with FPR, so that something is sold. So so this sales tax or whatever is collected, it will automatically inform FPR. And also this money will go to FPR, because previously many people would collect, because this is collected through these withholding agents. People collect and they are supposed to pass on, but there were many who disappear, and they use fake invoices, they wouldn't do it. So that's the other big thing. The third, I think, major loss was, especially in case of customs duty and the related taxes that import, was through smuggling, because the huge amount of leakage, because you see all these things about POL, so much of POL coming from Iran, unpaid taxes, are a lot of goods going under the Afghan transit and then coming back, and no taxes. And that was one component loss, but the other component was that they would misdeclare the prices. So now I think they're becoming more digitalized, and they're adopting some systems that this will become very difficult.
Right. So what were the reasons, as we have seen FBR receiving more tax, more than its target for the fourth consecutive month? What were the major contributing factors to that?
Well, I think they, you know, they tried to find out people, and also they changed some laws. I mean, for example, now previously, if a Pakistani had any living here but had some income deriving from abroad, which was kind of not accounted for because the government didn't know. But now they have signed up some agreements with the other countries. So anything happens, they inform Pakistan government, so they can go after people. And as soon as they started receiving these notices, people themselves realize that it's no longer possible. So you might as well pay. So that was because of the various taxes. Income tax went up the highest, about something like 40%. And other taxes also went up, but income tax really went up. So it's all these measures, I think. And also they had, I think because of all this IMF pressure, they had raised taxes. And just heard, I think today, that they said about windfall tax on banks. I think over 50 billion, I think they're going to collect from them. So all these loopholes were plugged, and that's what gave the
right. So this last particular thing that you just mentioned, the windfall tax, so as the banking sector is concerned, it had earned huge dividends because of the kind of appreciation of dollar against the rupee. Was it because of that particular reason solely?
That was one reason, but the other major reason was that you see, under the IMF conditions, government could no longer borrow straight from State Bank. So these banks would lend to government, and so they make that profit. I mean, through that, by giving loans to the government because the interest rate is quite high, and so they're making profit from that.
Right, Mr. Ramzan. Now, widening the tax base. As we have seen, Prime Minister also directing the concerned authorities to chalk out a comprehensive strategy to enhance the FBR's performance. He was also briefed that the measure of digitalization of this particular system is going to be the step the authorities are going to take. He at the same time stated that the revenue generation collection is the backbone of any country's economy. Well, in terms of taxation, how do you think this particular base could be widened, and especially when Dr. Manzoor has also mentioned there are certain undertaxed or untaxed sectors, how to bring them into the that particular net?
So first I would talk about how the FPR met its target, and it was highest than the last year it's collected. There are factors like told by Dr. Saab. And the other thing is that there are the rates were increased through this Finance Act, and before Finance Act even sales tax rate previously was 17% GST rate, and now it is 18%. So this is another factor, because it has impact on the incremental impact. Then there are withholding, because our around 60% of the direct taxes collection is through withholding taxes, and withholding taxes rates were also increased in this through the budget Finance Act 2023. So that is another impact. And the other thing is that that is quite normal that during the first 3 or 4 months there are tax returns are filed, and then some people deposit their taxes, annual taxes as well. But those factors are also there, the rate increase. The taxpayers, if we talk about the broadening of the tax base, there is no significant increase in that, and we appreciate FBR for taking the steps, but still for the last many years, it is not commendable in that way, because FBR or the officials or the system has not been able to increase the tax base. Up till now, in the last year, there were around 4 million taxpayers who filed their returns, and this year maybe we could reach that, but up till now there are 3.2 or 3.5, 3.3 million who filed their returns up till now for the tax year 2023. So there is no significant increase, and they have rightly pointed out that there are tax to GDP ratio is 12%, and which has to be, in my opinion, it has to be 20%, not 15%.
How would that be done? How can
that is very much possible. Only the broadening of the tax base, that is very much important.
Where to start from?
That is start from not to spare anyone, because this government during this current regime, I have seen that the departments, especially the government departments, are performing well. Maybe there is no political pressure, there is there are no other things, whatever not other pressures, political pressures like trade bodies pressures, they are not taking care of that.
Okay, so that's an understandable situation for right now. Okay,
yes.
So the interim setup is going to not last for very long. Of course, there is going to be an election, and the political government, whoever might it be,
yes,
is going to take over the helm, right? So in the short term, it is really commendable that certain steps have been taken in order to enhance that particular thing. In the longer term,
yes,
what sectors do you think should the authorities, or whoever comes into power, regardless of the fact, where they should actually start taking the maximum out from?
Yes. Agricultural sector, as Dr. Sab told, that is taxed under the provincial laws. Because they are paying the tax under the provincial laws, but the rates are very low, and even the provincial authorities are not able to collect that much tax, and that should also be collected in a way. Though the performance of those revenue authorities need to be increased.
Okay, so
yes,
is there any difficulty when we try to calculate the real income of the agriculture sector? Is there a difficulty the authorities face in calculating the overall dividend they have to actually get as a target?
They have not tried for this, because I also own some land, and nobody asks for from the farmers, even the big farmers, that what is your income, and have you kept the books of accounts and everything. There is no concept of keeping the books of accounts in the agricultural sector till now. They have not even prescribed that they should maintain. So if we see the agricultural income tax in the provinces, there are two mechanisms. One is per acre base and one is income based. And normally they collect, the revenue authorities collect the tax on per acre base, and that is very minimum amount, like 350 per acre if it is not Barani land. And if Barani, there is no, and that is collected only if the land is 12.5 acres above. So there is those authorities need to be empowered and trained for collection of the agricultural taxes. And then there is others. If we talk about the FBR,
okay, so
there is only solution is broadening of the tax base.
Okay, that broadening of tax base, the formulation of a comprehensive strategy has been directed by Prime Minister himself. Now, specifically the kind of stats that you've just shared regarding the agriculture sector. Now, since there is interim setup in place right now, so for bringing in these changes, enhancing, as you have mentioned, the tax collection for a land that is beyond 12.5 acre, if I got you correctly.
Yeah.
And around 350
for up to
per acre.
Yes, 350
okay, so
and 400.
To enhance these values,
yes.
do you think there is some sort of legislation required for that?
That is provincial legislation, and they can do easily in any provincial budget annually. That is not, but main thing is implementation. The capacity of the revenue authority, provincial revenue authorities, the capacity of FBR is much better than the provincial authorities, but the capacity building of the provincial revenue authority is needed.
Right, Dr. Manzoor, your understanding regarding that. Now, enhancing these values as far as to get the maximum dividend out of the agriculture sector, the problems which have been mentioned by Mr. Ramzan, what's the solution according to them? Do you firstly, do you agree with what he had already said, or are there any different estimations on your part?
Well, I agree with him because he has first-hand experience. You know, he says he owns some land, and that's what his personal experience. So I think he must be right. But one other thing I think the government is soon going to do is that this lot of money changes hands in cash, and they're trying to digitalize. So if a lawyer or a doctor or an architect charge a fee, it's not going to be cash. It's going to be through that. I mean, they're going to put some penalties and so that it happens. I think that would also make a big difference.
So let me take Mr. Ramzan's point on one aspect that we previously discussed in one of our programs regarding the role of the middleman. I mean, perhaps you had suggested that connecting the farmers directly with the end consumers and eliminating that role of the middleman. Was it your suggestion?
I don't think it was me, because
that?
sometimes you cannot, I mean, there has to be, you know, somebody, I mean, it's not all the time a buyer can get there, because the middleman, you know, use cash and they can do it. I don't think that will, but the markets can be made more efficient, I should say.
Right. So what's your understanding, Mr. Ramzan, when it comes to the role of the middleman?
No, middleman, having middleman is not a curse basically. Only the documentation is required. What is needed is from the from the corporate farmers or the big farmers, they should be required to maintain the records, and then when it goes to the middleman, that should also be documented, and when it passes on till the end consumer, so documentation should be there. So only through the documentation of that sector, although the FBR on the business sector, documentation has improved for the last in 1 decade around, you can say, through digitalization, through automation and everything. Documentation is up to the level of documentation has increased, but still there is a lot to do in that sector as well for the documentation of the economy, and digitalization is the solution. And also elimination of the 5,000 notes. It was heard in the news that government is thinking of. That would be a good step if government could do that. And the payment mechanism through the digital modes, that would definitely add value to the documentation of the economy, and then definitely more people will come under the
Ramzan,
tax
Senior Economist and FCMA Tax Expert, CEO, TMRC, Chairman Tax Committee and former Executive Member of Islamabad Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you very much for taking time out for views on news tonight. We really appreciate that. Dr. Manzoor Ahmad, Member Tax Force for Tax Reforms. Thank you very much once again for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves, and thank you very much for watching.